History is never just about dates and facts. It is about the people bold enough to bend them. Donald Trump's story is not only the biography of one man, but also a reflection of American ambition, excess, survival, and reinvention. From his grandfather's Klondike saloons to his father's post-war housing empire, and from Manhattan skyscrapers to television boardrooms, the Trump saga is a mirror of the American century. It is a story of spectacle and risk, where perception often outweighs reality and brand becomes more powerful than balance sheets. Trump did not simply build real estate. He built an image of wealth, dominance, and inevitability. His failures became headlines, but his comebacks became myths that only fueled his legend. Each deal, each setback, and each comeback reveal a repeating pattern. Chaos turned into opportunity. Spectacle turned into capital. To understand Trump is to understand how business, media, and politics fused into one unstoppable force. This narrative is not just about one family. It is about how institutions reward persistence, audacity, and noise. It is about how a name can become an empire, and how that empire can reach from boardrooms into living rooms and, eventually, into the White House. What follows is not just a history of Trump, but a blueprint of how influence is built, monetized, and preserved. This is the American story told through the lens of a family that mastered both the system and the spotlight. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you want more powerful stories that uncover the truth behind history's biggest figures. The Queen's Dynasty, building America's real estate empire. Donald Trump's story begins not with him, but with his grandfather, Friedrich Trumpf, who arrived from Germany in 1885 and changed his name to Frederick Trump. What most people don't realize is that Frederick made his fortune during the Klondike gold rush, not by mining gold, but by running restaurants and hotels that served miners, prostitutes, and gamblers. He charged outrageous prices for basic meals and created the first Trump family tradition of profiting from other people's dreams. When Frederick died suddenly from the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, he left behind a pregnant wife and a real estate empire that would shape American cities for the next century. His death came just as he was planning to return to Germany permanently, but fate kept the Trump family in America. Fred Trump, Donald's father, inherited this entrepreneurial spirit, but channeled it into something far more systematic and profitable. During the Great Depression, when most businesses were failing, Fred Trump was building his first houses in Queens, selling them for $3,090 each, when the average American made just $1,368 per year. He understood something that other developers missed. The government was about to subsidize housing for returning World War II veterans, and he positioned himself perfectly to capitalize on this massive wealth transfer. By 1950, Fred Trump had built over 27,000 apartments and houses, making him one of the largest private landlords in America. His construction crews could complete an entire house in just 16 hours, revolutionizing suburban development techniques that other builders couldn't match. The Trump family's wealth wasn't just built on smart business decisions. It was built on a systematic understanding of how to work government systems. Fred Trump mastered the art of using Federal Housing Administration loans, which allowed him to build with almost no money down while keeping all the profits. He would purchase land, get government backing for construction loans, build the properties, then refinance them and pocket the difference. This wasn't illegal, but it was a form of financial engineering that most developers couldn't execute. Fred's projects generated over $100 million in profits by 1960, equivalent to nearly $1 billion today. He discovered that by building in specific census tracts, he could maximize government subsidies while minimizing his personal financial risk. What made Fred Trump different from other real estate moguls was his understanding of racial demographics and government policy. He deliberately built in areas where white families were moving, following what sociologists now call white flight patterns. His developments in Brooklyn and Queens were specifically designed to attract middle-class white families leaving Manhattan, and he used restrictive covenants and informal discrimination to maintain the racial composition of his properties. This strategy was morally questionable, but financially brilliant. His properties held their value, while others in changing neighborhoods declined. Fred Trump's buildings maintained 98% occupancy rates, when similar properties averaged only 85%, generating millions more in rental income annually. The Trump Organization's early success was also built on a network of political connections that most people never knew existed. Fred Trump was a major contributor to Brooklyn Democratic political machines, paying for influence that helped him secure building permits, zoning variances, and government contracts. He understood that in New York real estate, your political connections were more valuable than your architectural plans. These relationships would later prove crucial when his son Donald needed similar favors for his Manhattan projects. Fred kept detailed records of every politician he helped, every favor he provided, and every obligation that was owed to him. His political network included judges, city council members, building inspectors, and union leaders who could expedite projects or eliminate bureaucratic obstacles. Donald Trump grew up watching his father operate this empire from their home in Jamaica Estates, Queens, a neighborhood that Fred had essentially created from scratch. The house itself was a showcase of Trump family wealth, featuring 23 rooms, a ballroom, and grounds that required a full-time gardener. But what most people don't know is that Fred Trump used this house as a business tool, hosting political figures and potential business partners in settings designed to display his success. Every dinner party was a networking opportunity. Every holiday gathering was a chance to discuss deals. The Trump family employed a full-time driver, 3 housekeepers, 2 gardeners, and a personal secretary, creating a household operation that functioned like a small corporation. The family dynamics that shaped Donald Trump were complex and calculating. Fred Trump didn't just want successful children. He wanted children who could expand his empire into areas he couldn't reach. He saw Donald's personality, aggressive, attention-seeking, comfortable with conflict, as perfect for the more glamorous world of Manhattan real estate. Fred had built his empire by staying under the radar, but Manhattan required a different approach. You needed to be a celebrity, a public figure, someone who could attract attention and generate excitement about their projects. Donald was taught from childhood that business was war, that competitors were enemies, and that winning justified almost any tactics necessary to achieve success. By the time Donald Trump graduated from Wharton Business School in 1968, the family empire was generating over $50 million annually in revenue and controlled more than 27,000 residential units across New York City. Fred Trump had created a real estate machine that produced consistent cash flow, maintained high occupancy rates, and grew in value every year. But he also understood that his business model had limitations. There was only so much outer borough real estate you could develop before you hit diminishing returns. The Trump Organization employed over 600 people, operated its own construction company, maintained relationships with dozens of subcontractors, and had established credit lines with multiple banks that could finance projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The transition from Fred to Donald wasn't just a father passing business to his son. It was a strategic pivot from one business model to another. Fred Trump's empire was built on volume and efficiency, constructing housing for middle-class families using government subsidies and systematic cost controls. Donald Trump's vision was completely different. He wanted to build monuments, skyscrapers that would make him famous and generate the kind of wealth that could buy social status and political influence. Where Fred focused on steady rental income from multiple properties, Donald dreamed of spectacular profits from individual landmark projects that would establish him as one of America's most prominent businessmen. What most people never understood about the Trump family business was that it was always designed to be a platform for something bigger than real estate. Fred Trump accumulated wealth and political connections, but he did it quietly, staying out of newspapers and avoiding public attention. Donald Trump took those same resources and used them as launching pads for celebrity, for brand building, for the kind of public recognition that could open doors to opportunities beyond New York real estate. The Trump Organization wasn't just a development company. It was a sophisticated system for converting political influence, government subsidies, and media attention into private wealth and social status. Fred Trump's business practices also included some controversial elements that would later influence his son's approach to operations. He was investigated by the Justice Department in 1973 for racial discrimination in housing, though the case was settled without admission of wrongdoing. He maintained relationships with organized crime figures who controlled concrete suppliers and waste management companies, understanding that these connections were sometimes necessary for completing projects in New York City. His ability to work with morally ambiguous partners while avoiding legal consequences taught Donald valuable lessons about navigating gray areas of business and politics. The Trump family's wealth accumulation strategy also involved sophisticated tax avoidance techniques that allowed them to pass money between generations while minimizing tax obligations. Fred Trump created complex trust structures, used depreciation schedules aggressively, and employed accounting methods that maximized deductions while staying within legal boundaries. These techniques enabled the family to build wealth faster than competitors while keeping more of their profits. Donald learned these financial strategies from childhood, understanding how legal loopholes could be exploited to maximize family wealth. The scale of Fred Trump's operation was unprecedented for outer borough development. His company controlled more rental units than many major corporations, managed properties worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and employed more people than most manufacturing companies. This experience gave Donald exposure to large-scale business operations that most real estate developers never encountered. He learned about managing complex organizations, coordinating multiple projects simultaneously, and dealing with regulatory agencies across different jurisdictions. Fred Trump's relationships with labor unions were also crucial to his success and would influence Donald's later approach to union negotiations. He understood that maintaining cooperative relationships with construction unions was essential for completing projects on time and within budget. His approach combined respect for union leadership with firm negotiation on wages and working conditions. These relationships allowed him to avoid strikes and work stoppages that could have cost millions in delays and additional expenses. But here's what nobody talks about regarding Donald Trump's early years. He wasn't just inheriting a business empire. He was inheriting a sophisticated system for manipulating government policies and public resources for private profit. The techniques his father had perfected, using government subsidies, exploiting tax advantages, leveraging political connections, would become the foundation for everything Donald Trump achieved in Manhattan and beyond. Military school and the making of a maverick. At age 13, Donald Trump was sent to New York Military Academy, and this decision would fundamentally shape the man who would later become president. Most people know this basic fact, but what they don't realize is that Trump wasn't sent there for discipline problems. He was sent there because his father recognized that his son's aggressive personality and need for attention could either destroy him or make him incredibly powerful, depending on how it was channeled. Fred Trump had studied successful Manhattan developers and noticed that the most effective ones had learned to project authority and command respect in rooms full of powerful men. The academy cost $2,400 per year, when the average American family income was only $5,600, making it affordable only to the wealthy elite who understood that connections formed in adolescence could last lifetimes. New York Military Academy wasn't just any boarding school. It was an institution designed to take wealthy kids who were too rebellious for regular prep schools and turn them into leaders who could operate in high-stakes environments. The school's philosophy was based on breaking down existing personality traits and rebuilding them according to military principles of hierarchy, discipline, and strategic thinking. For Trump, who had always been the center of attention in his family, this represented the first time he had to compete for recognition and status. The Academy's alumni included future business leaders, military officers, and politicians who would form networks that lasted decades after graduation. The Academy's daily routine was deliberately harsh and demanding. Students woke at 5:30 a.m. for inspection, followed by military drills, academic classes conducted in military style, mandatory sports participation, and evening study periods that lasted until lights out at 10 p.m. What made this particularly challenging for Trump was that, unlike his home environment, where his personality quirks were tolerated or even encouraged, the military academy demanded conformity to external standards that had nothing to do with his family's wealth or status. Students who failed inspections faced penalties that could include weekend restrictions, extra duties, or even dismissal from the academy. Trump's adaptation to military school revealed personality traits that would define his entire career. Rather than being crushed by the institutional pressure, he learned to work within hierarchical systems while finding ways to stand out and gain recognition. He became company commander during his senior year, which meant he was responsible for disciplining other students and maintaining military standards. This position taught him that authority could be exercised through formal structures, but real influence came from understanding what motivated the people around you. His classmates later recalled that Trump was demanding but fair as a leader, expecting excellence while showing genuine concern for cadets under his command. The competitive environment at New York Military Academy was unlike anything Trump had experienced in Queens. Students came from wealthy families across the East Coast, and success wasn't just measured by academic performance. It was measured by leadership ability, athletic achievement, and social influence among peers. Trump learned that in environments filled with ambitious, wealthy young men, you had to be more aggressive, more confident, and more willing to take risks than everyone else if you wanted to rise to the top. The Academy maintained detailed rankings of cadet performance that were posted publicly, creating constant competition for status and recognition. What most biographers miss about Trump's military school experience is how it taught him to use conflict as a tool for gaining attention and establishing dominance. Military academy culture rewarded students who could handle confrontation, who could maintain their composure under pressure, and who could project confidence even when they weren't certain about their position. These skills would later prove essential when Trump entered the cutthroat world of Manhattan real estate, where developers competed not just for deals, but for the attention of investors, politicians, and media. The Academy's boxing program, which Trump participated in, taught him that controlled aggression could be channeled productively rather than destructively. The academic program at New York Military Academy was designed to prepare students for admission to elite colleges, but it also provided practical education in leadership, public speaking, and organizational management. Trump learned to address groups of people with confidence, to present his ideas in ways that commanded attention, and to maintain authority even when dealing with people who might be smarter or more knowledgeable than him. These weren't just social skills, they were business tools that would prove invaluable in his career. His English teacher noted that Trump had unusual ability to persuade audiences even when his facts were questionable, a skill that would define his communication style throughout his life. Trump's athletic participation at the Academy was strategically chosen to maximize his visibility and influence. He played baseball and football, sports that required teamwork, but also allowed for individual recognition. His coaches noted that he was competitive to an unusual degree, often continuing to argue calls or discuss strategy long after games had ended. This intensity wasn't just about winning games, it was about establishing a reputation as someone who cared more about success than most people, someone who would go to greater lengths to achieve his goals. Trump's athletic achievements were modest by Academy standards, but his competitive spirit impressed teammates and opponents alike. The social dynamics at military school also taught Trump lessons about class, status, and power that shaped his worldview. He observed how students from different backgrounds navigated the academy's hierarchy, noting that success required different strategies, depending on your family's wealth, your regional background, and your natural personality traits. Students from old money families could succeed through quiet competence and social connections, but students from newer money, like Trump, needed to be more aggressive and attention-seeking. The academy's formal social events, including dances with nearby girls' schools, provided opportunities to practice social skills that would prove valuable in business networking. One of the most important aspects of Trump's military academy experience was learning to function effectively in environments where everyone was wealthy and ambitious. This prepared him for Manhattan real estate, where he would need to compete with developers who had similar resources and equally strong motivations. The academy taught him that having money wasn't enough. You also needed to project confidence, maintain relationships with influential people, and position yourself as someone who could deliver results under pressure. His dormitory roommates included sons of corporate executives, military officers, and political figures who would later provide business connections and social introductions. The discipline and structure of military school also gave Trump tools for managing complex projects and multiple responsibilities simultaneously. Military academy students were required to excel academically, while also fulfilling military duties, participating in athletics, and maintaining social relationships. This experience taught Trump to compartmentalize different aspects of his life and to maintain high performance standards across multiple areas simultaneously. He learned to delegate responsibilities effectively while maintaining oversight of all activities under his command, skills that would prove essential when managing large real estate developments. Trump's relationship with academy faculty provided him with adult mentors outside his family, who could offer different perspectives on leadership and success. His military science instructor, a retired Army colonel, taught him that successful leader needed to understand both strategy and tactics, the big picture vision that guided long-term planning, and the detailed execution that determined whether plans would succeed or fail. This lesson influenced Trump's approach to business deals, where he learned to focus on broad objectives while paying careful attention to contract details and implementation challenges. The graduation ceremony at New York Military Academy in 1964 marked Trump's transformation from a rebellious Queens teenager into a young man with the social skills and personal confidence needed to succeed in competitive environments. His academic performance was solid but not exceptional, ranking in the top third of his class. However, his leadership positions and athletic participation had given him visibility and respect among classmates and faculty that would translate into lifelong relationships and business opportunities. The military academy experience also exposed Trump to different regional cultures and family backgrounds that broadened his understanding of American society beyond New York. Students came from the South, Midwest, and West Coast, bringing different perspectives on business, politics, and social relationships. This exposure helped Trump develop the ability to adapt his communication style to different audiences, a skill that would prove valuable in his later business and political careers. Trump's time at the Academy also coincided with significant historical events, including the early stages of the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement. These developments influenced classroom discussions and shaped his generation's understanding of American power and social change. While Trump would later avoid military service through educational and medical deferments, his military school experience gave him familiarity with military culture and terminology that he would use throughout his career. The Academy's emphasis on tradition and ceremony also influenced Trump's later appreciation for pageantry and formal events. He learned that properly staged ceremonies could create powerful emotional impressions and reinforce hierarchical relationships. This understanding would later influence his approach to business events, political rallies, and presidential ceremonies, where he consistently emphasized dramatic presentation and formal protocol. The network of relationships Trump developed at Military Academy extended far beyond his immediate classmates. Alumni events, reunions, and social gatherings provided ongoing opportunities to maintain connections with successful individuals from various fields. These relationships became part of Trump's broader social and business network, providing introductions and opportunities that would prove valuable throughout his career. But here's what nobody realizes about Trump's Military Academy years. They didn't just teach him leadership and discipline. They taught him how to build and maintain a personal brand in competitive environments. Every day at the academy was about projecting an image of competence and confidence, even when you weren't sure what you were doing. These skills would later prove essential when Trump needed to convince investors to fund his projects, attract media attention to his developments, and establish himself as a celebrity businessman. The Wharton years. Learning the art of the deal. Donald Trump's decision to attend the Wharton School of Business wasn't just about getting a college education. It was a calculated move to gain access to the networks and knowledge that would allow him to succeed in Manhattan real estate. Wharton wasn't just any business school. It was the training ground for America's financial elite, producing more Wall Street executives and major real estate developers than any other institution. Trump understood that his father's outer borough empire had limitations, and breaking into Manhattan would require connections and credibility that could only come from the right educational background. The transfer from Fordham University to Wharton in 1966 cost his family an additional $3,000 per year, but Fred Trump considered it an essential investment in his son's future. The Wharton program in the late 1960s was designed around case study analysis, where students examined real business situations and developed solutions under time pressure. This methodology taught Trump to quickly analyze complex situations, identify key variables that determine success or failure, and present his conclusions with confidence even when working with incomplete information. These skills would prove essential in real estate development, where deals often required quick decisions based on limited data and changing market conditions. The program emphasized quantitative analysis, but Trump discovered that successful business decisions often depended more on understanding human psychology and market timing than mathematical calculations. Trump's academic performance at Wharton was competent, but not exceptional, with grades that placed him in the middle of his class. However, his real education came from studying his classmates, many of whom came from families that controlled major corporations, investment banks, and real estate empires. He observed how they talked about business, how they analyzed opportunities, and how they thought about risk and reward. More importantly, he learned to present himself as their equal, even though his family's wealth was newer and less socially prestigious. His dormitory floor included students whose families owned department store chains, oil companies, and manufacturing businesses that had been operating for generations. The curriculum at Wharton emphasized quantitative analysis and financial modeling, skills that would prove crucial when Trump began developing major Manhattan projects. Students learned to evaluate cash flows, analyze market trends, and structure financing for large-scale investments. Trump absorbed these technical skills, but he also developed an intuitive understanding of how financial markets worked and how to present projects in ways that would attract investors and lenders. His finance professor noted that Trump had unusual ability to identify the key assumptions that determined whether complex financial models would prove accurate in real-world applications. What made Trump different from most of his Wharton classmates was his family's hands-on real estate experience combined with his academic training in business theory. While other students learned about real estate development from textbooks and case studies, Trump had grown up watching his father manage actual construction projects, negotiate with contractors, and deal with government bureaucracy. This combination of practical experience and academic theory gave him advantages that would prove decisive in his early Manhattan deals. He could speak the language of sophisticated investors, while also understanding the practical challenges of actually building and managing properties. The social environment at Wharton introduced Trump to people who would become important connections throughout his career. His classmates included future investment bankers, corporate executives, and political figures who would later provide financing, partnerships, and government approvals for his projects. Trump understood that these relationships were as valuable as anything he learned in the classroom, and he cultivated friendships with classmates who seemed likely to achieve significant success in fields that could benefit his real estate ambitions. He maintained detailed contact information for dozens of classmates and made efforts to stay in touch after graduation. Wharton's location in Philadelphia also gave Trump access to East Coast business culture beyond New York, exposing him to different approaches to deal-making and relationship building. He learned that successful business required adapting your style to different audiences. What worked with New York politicians might not work with Philadelphia bankers, and what impressed Manhattan investors might seem crude to old money families from Boston or Washington. This cultural sophistication would prove valuable when Trump began seeking financing from diverse sources for his Manhattan developments. The academic emphasis on entrepreneurship and innovation encouraged students to think beyond traditional business models and consider new approaches to familiar problems. Trump absorbed these lessons and began developing ideas for how real estate development could be combined with entertainment, celebrity culture, and media attention to create value beyond just building and renting properties. This thinking would later influence his approach to projects like Trump Tower and his various casino developments. His senior thesis examined the potential for combining real estate development with retail entertainment, presaging his later interest in casinos and mixed-use projects. Trump's professors noted his ability to present ideas with extraordinary confidence, even when his analysis was incomplete or his conclusions were questionable. This skill, projecting certainty in uncertain situations, became one of his most important business tools. In real estate development, investors and lenders often had to make decisions based on incomplete information, and developers who could present their projects with absolute confidence had significant advantages over those who acknowledged uncertainties. Trump learned to frame potential problems as manageable challenges rather than serious risks, a technique that would prove crucial in securing financing for ambitious projects. The case study method at Wharton also taught Trump to identify and exploit weaknesses in his competitors' strategies. Students were encouraged to analyze business situations from multiple perspectives and find opportunities that others had missed. Trump developed a particular talent for identifying situations where established players had become complacent, or where changing market conditions created new opportunities for aggressive newcomers. This competitive analysis would become central to his approach to Manhattan real estate, where he would consistently challenge established developers by offering something different or better. One of the most valuable aspects of Trump's Wharton education was learning to understand and manipulate financial leverage. The school's curriculum emphasized how borrowed money could be used to amplify returns on successful investments, but it also taught students to structure deals so that lenders bore most of the risk, while developers kept most of the potential profits. These lessons would become central to Trump's business model throughout his career. He learned to present projects in ways that minimized perceived risk, while maximizing potential returns, making his deals attractive to conservative lenders and aggressive investors simultaneously. Trump's extracurricular activities at Wharton were chosen strategically to build relationships and develop skills that would be useful in business. He joined the real estate club, participated in investment competitions, and attended networking events that brought together students from different academic programs. These activities provided opportunities to practice presenting ideas, negotiating agreements, and building coalitions, skills that would prove essential in his real estate career. He also developed relationships with faculty members who had connections to major corporations and financial institutions. The Wharton Alumni Network provided Trump with access to business leaders across multiple industries, who could provide advice, introductions, and business opportunities throughout his career. The school's alumni included CEOs of major corporations, partners at prestigious law firms, and managing directors of investment banks who controlled access to capital markets. Trump understood the value of these connections and made efforts to maintain relationships with alumni who could be helpful to his business ambitions. But here's what most people don't understand about Trump's Wharton years. He wasn't just learning business techniques. He was learning how to package and sell himself as a product. Wharton taught students that personal credibility and professional relationships were as important as financial analysis and market knowledge. Trump learned to present himself as someone who could deliver results, attract media attention, and generate excitement around his projects, skills that would prove more valuable than any technical knowledge when he entered the Manhattan real estate market. Culture beyond New York, exposing him to different approaches to deal-making and relationship building. He learned that successful business required adapting your style to different audiences. What worked with New York politicians might not work with Philadelphia bankers, and what impressed Manhattan investors might seem crude to old money families from Boston or Washington. The academic emphasis on entrepreneurship and innovation encouraged students to think beyond traditional business models and consider new approaches to familiar problems. Trump absorbed these lessons and began developing ideas for how real estate development could be combined with entertainment, celebrity culture, and media attention to create value beyond just building and renting properties. This thinking would later influence his approach to projects like Trump Tower and his various casino developments. Trump's professors noted his ability to present ideas with extraordinary confidence, even when his analysis was incomplete or his conclusions were questionable. This skill, projecting certainty in uncertain situations, became one of his most important business tools. In real estate development, investors and lenders often had to make decisions based on incomplete information, and developers who could present their projects with absolute confidence had significant advantages over those who acknowledged uncertainties. The case study method at Wharton also taught Trump to identify and exploit weaknesses in his competitors' strategies. Students were encouraged to analyze business situations from multiple perspectives and find opportunities that others had missed. Trump developed a particular talent for identifying situations where established players had become complacent, or where changing market conditions created new opportunities for aggressive newcomers. One of the most valuable aspects of Trump's Wharton education was learning to understand and manipulate financial leverage. The school's curriculum emphasized how borrowed money could be used to amplify returns on successful investments, but it also taught students to structure deals so that lenders bore most of the risk while developers kept most of the potential profits. These lessons would become central to Trump's business model throughout his career. But here's what most people don't understand about Trump's Wharton years. He wasn't just learning business techniques. He was learning how to package and sell himself as a product. Wharton taught students that personal credibility and professional relationships were as important as financial analysis and market knowledge. Trump learned to present himself as someone who could deliver results, attract media attention, and generate excitement around his projects. Skills that would prove more valuable than any technical knowledge when he entered the Manhattan real estate market. The Manhattan Gamble, from Queens to Fifth Avenue. In 1971, Donald Trump made the most important decision of his business career. He convinced his father to let him take control of the family real estate company and shift its focus from Queens apartment buildings to Manhattan commercial development. This wasn't just a change in business strategy. It was a complete transformation from a stable, profitable, low-profile operation to a high-risk, high-reward venture that required different skills, different connections, and a completely different approach to publicity and self-promotion. The move from outer borough residential development to Manhattan commercial real estate represented a quantum leap in complexity, requiring Trump to master new financing techniques, navigate different regulatory environments, and compete with developers who had decades more experience. Fred Trump's business model had generated steady profits for decades by building middle-class housing in Queens and Brooklyn, but it had natural limitations. There was only so much outer borough land available for development, and rent control laws were making it harder to generate significant profits from residential properties. Donald Trump recognized that Manhattan commercial real estate offered the possibility of much larger deals, but it also required competing with established developers who had been working in Manhattan for generations. The typical Manhattan office building cost 10 times more to develop than a Queens apartment complex, but could generate 20 times more profit if successful. Trump's first major Manhattan project was the transformation of the old Commodore Hotel into the Grand Hyatt New York. The Commodore was located next to Grand Central Terminal, making it potentially valuable, but the building was deteriorating, and the surrounding area had become seedy and dangerous. Most developers avoided projects in that neighborhood, but Trump saw an opportunity to capitalize on what he believed would be Manhattan's eventual revitalization. The hotel was losing $1.5 million annually and faced foreclosure, creating an opportunity for someone willing to take on significant risk for potentially massive rewards. The Commodore deal demonstrated Trump's understanding of how to use government subsidies and tax breaks to make risky projects financially viable. He negotiated a 40-year tax abatement with the city that would save millions of dollars in property taxes, then used those savings to justify construction loans and attract investors. The project wouldn't have been profitable without government assistance, but Trump presented it as a private sector success story that proved his development abilities. The tax abatement was worth approximately $160 million over its full term, essentially providing government subsidy for what appeared to be private development. What made the Commodore project revolutionary wasn't just its financial structure. It was Trump's approach to publicity and self-promotion. Previous generations of developers had worked quietly, avoiding media attention and focusing on building relationships with investors and government officials behind closed doors. Trump deliberately courted newspaper reporters, gave interviews about his plans, and positioned himself as a young, dynamic developer who was revitalizing New York City. He understood that media attention could create excitement about projects that would attract customers, investors, and political support. The Grand Hyatt opened in 1980 and was immediately successful, generating positive cash flow and establishing Trump's reputation as a developer who could deliver results in Manhattan. But the project's real value was demonstrating Trump's ability to navigate complex negotiations with city government, attract major corporate partners like Hyatt, and generate media coverage that enhanced his professional reputation. These capabilities would prove essential for his much larger and more ambitious projects. The hotel's success also provided Trump with credibility when approaching lenders and investors for future developments. Trump's next major project was Trump Tower, a 58-story mixed-use skyscraper on Fifth Avenue that would serve as both his personal residence and business headquarters. The building's design was deliberately flashy and attention-getting, featuring a pink marble atrium, brass fixtures, and luxury retail spaces that were designed to attract wealthy customers and media attention. Trump understood that in Manhattan real estate, generating excitement and desire was as important as providing functional space. The building cost $300 million to construct, making it one of the most expensive residential developments in Manhattan history. The financing for Trump Tower required sophisticated financial engineering that combined construction loans, pre-sales of residential units, long-term leases with retail tenants, and personal guarantees that put Trump's family wealth at risk. The project represented a much larger financial commitment than anything the Trump Organization had previously attempted, but it also offered the possibility of generating enough profit to establish Trump as a major Manhattan developer. Trump pre-sold 60% of the residential units before construction was completed, generating cash flow that helped finance the project while reducing his financial risk. Trump Tower's design and marketing were based on Trump's understanding of how wealthy people wanted to live and work in Manhattan. The residential units were marketed to celebrities, foreign investors, and wealthy individuals who valued luxury, security, and social status over practical considerations like space efficiency or cost effectiveness. The retail spaces attracted high-end brands that wanted to be associated with Trump's developing reputation for luxury and exclusivity. Tiffany & Co. signed a long-term lease for the ground floor retail space, providing prestigious anchor tenant that attracted other luxury retailers. The construction process for Trump Tower also demonstrated Trump's ability to manage complex projects involving multiple contractors, suppliers, and government agencies. He learned to coordinate construction schedules, manage cost overruns, and maintain quality standards while dealing with the unique challenges of building in densely populated Manhattan. These project management skills would prove essential for his later developments. The building required over 200 construction workers and dozens of specialized contractors working simultaneously on different aspects of the project. Trump Tower's success established Trump as a major figure in Manhattan real estate, but it also created expectations for continued growth and increasingly ambitious projects. The building generated substantial profits, but maintaining his reputation required Trump to continuously announce new developments, attract media attention, and demonstrate that his initial success wasn't just luck or favorable market conditions. The building's success also made Trump a target for criticism from competitors who resented his rapid rise and unconventional marketing methods. The Trump Organization's Manhattan expansion also required developing relationships with different types of business partners and government officials than those his father had worked with in Queens. Manhattan real estate involved investment bankers, foreign investors, luxury retailers, and city officials who operated at higher levels of sophistication and expected different approaches to negotiation and relationship building. Trump had to learn new protocols for dealing with these more demanding and influential partners while maintaining the aggressive negotiating style that had served him well in outer borough developments. Trump's success in Manhattan also attracted attention from organized crime figures who controlled various aspects of New York's construction industry. Concrete suppliers, waste management companies, and some labor unions had connections to criminal organizations that could create problems for developers who didn't cooperate with their demands. Trump learned to navigate these relationships carefully, paying what was necessary to avoid problems while avoiding deeper involvement in illegal activities. This experience taught him valuable lessons about operating in environments where legal and illegal activities intersected. The scale of Trump's Manhattan projects also required him to develop new marketing and sales techniques. Unlike his father's apartment buildings, which were rented to middle-class families, Trump's Manhattan properties needed to attract wealthy buyers and tenants who had numerous alternatives. He learned to create marketing campaigns that emphasized exclusivity, luxury, and social status, rather than practical benefits like location or value. These marketing skills would prove valuable in his later ventures beyond real estate. Trump's expansion into Manhattan also introduced him to the world of architectural design and aesthetic presentation. Working with architects and interior designers, he developed an understanding of how physical spaces could be designed to create emotional responses and reinforce brand messages. The opulent design of Trump Tower, with its marble surfaces and gold accents, became a signature style that would be replicated in his later projects around the world. The financial success of Trump's Manhattan projects also allowed him to begin thinking about expansion beyond New York. He started exploring opportunities in other major cities and began developing the licensing strategies that would later become central to his business model. The Trump brand was beginning to have value independent of any specific building or location. Trump's media relationships during this period also evolved from simple publicity seeking to sophisticated brand management. He learned to time announcements for maximum impact, coordinate media coverage across multiple outlets, and use controversy and conflict to generate attention. These media management skills would prove valuable throughout his career in business and politics. The transition from Queens to Manhattan also required Trump to upgrade his personal lifestyle and social connections to match his new business environment. He began attending exclusive social events, joined prestigious clubs, and cultivated relationships with celebrities and social figures who could enhance his reputation and provide access to potential customers and business partners. But here's what nobody talks about regarding Trump's transition to Manhattan. It wasn't just about building bigger projects. It was about transforming himself from a real estate developer into a celebrity businessman whose personal reputation became as valuable as his actual properties. The Casino King, Atlantic City, and the Art of Financial Engineering. Donald Trump's expansion into Atlantic City casino gambling represented his most ambitious and ultimately most dangerous business venture. In 1982, when New Jersey legalized casino gambling to revitalize Atlantic City's declining economy, Trump saw an opportunity to apply his Manhattan real estate skills to an entirely different industry. What most people don't realize is that Trump didn't enter the casino business to run gambling operations. He entered it because casinos represented the ultimate combination of real estate development, celebrity culture, and media attention. The casino industry offered the possibility of generating hundreds of millions in revenue from single properties, far exceeding anything possible in traditional real estate development. Trump's first Atlantic City project was a partnership with Holiday Inn to build Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino. The deal demonstrated his growing sophistication in financial engineering, as he convinced Holiday Inn to finance the construction while giving him management control and the right to put his name on the building. This structure allowed Trump to develop a major casino property without investing significant amounts of his own money, while positioning himself as the public face of the operation. The partnership agreement gave Trump 50% ownership of the casino for only a $10 million investment, while Holiday Inn provided the remaining $210 million in construction financing. The casino industry in the early 1980s was dominated by Las Vegas operators who understood gambling better than real estate. But Trump believed his Manhattan experience gave him advantages in creating environments that would attract wealthy customers. He designed Trump Plaza to feel more like a luxury Manhattan hotel than a traditional casino, with upscale restaurants, expensive entertainment, and accommodations that would appeal to high-end travelers rather than typical gamblers. The casino featured crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and artwork that created an atmosphere of luxury and sophistication that differentiated it from more traditional gambling establishments. Trump's approach to casino marketing was revolutionary for Atlantic City. Instead of focusing on gambling promotions and slot machine players, he positioned his casinos as entertainment destinations where celebrities would appear, important events would be held, and wealthy people would come to be seen as much as to gamble. This strategy required much higher operating costs than traditional casinos, but Trump believed it would generate premium revenues from customers who cared more about social status than gambling odds. He hosted boxing matches featuring major champions, concerts by prominent entertainers, and social events that attracted media coverage and wealthy patrons. The success of Trump Plaza led to Trump's second Atlantic City project, Trump's Castle, which he purchased from Hilton Hotels in 1985. This acquisition demonstrated Trump's growing confidence in the casino business and his belief that he could operate gambling properties more effectively than established casino companies. Trump's Castle was marketed as a more intimate, upscale alternative to the larger casinos, targeting customers who wanted luxury and personalized service. The casino cost $320 million to acquire and renovate, representing Trump's largest single business investment at that time. But Trump's most ambitious Atlantic City project was the Trump Taj Mahal, which he called the eighth wonder of the world when it opened in 1990. The Taj Mahal was designed to be the largest and most luxurious casino in the world, featuring over 3,000 slot machines, 160 gaming tables, multiple restaurants, and entertainment facilities that could accommodate major concerts and sporting events. The project cost over $1 billion to build, making it one of the most expensive casino developments in history. The casino's design incorporated Middle Eastern architectural themes, including minarets, domes, and elaborate decorative elements that created a fantasy environment unlike anything else in Atlantic City. The financing for the Taj Mahal required Trump to use increasingly complex and risky financial structures. He issued junk bonds with interest rates as high as 14%, personally guaranteed hundreds of millions of dollars in debt, and pledged his other properties as collateral. These financing arrangements meant that the Taj Mahal would need to generate enormous revenues just to cover its debt service, let alone produce profits for Trump's other investments. The casino needed to generate approximately $1.3 million per day just to meet its debt obligations, a target that proved difficult to achieve consistently. Trump's casino operations also introduced him to a different regulatory environment than he had encountered in real estate development. New Jersey's Casino Control Commission required extensive background checks, financial disclosures, and ongoing oversight that limited Trump's flexibility in managing his businesses. He had to prove not only that he could operate casinos effectively, but also that he met the state's standards for character and financial responsibility. The regulatory process was expensive and time-consuming, requiring teams of lawyers and accountants to maintain compliance with complex gaming regulations. The casino business also required Trump to develop relationships with labor unions, since most casino employees were unionized, and strikes could shut down operations completely. Trump's approach to union negotiations was typically aggressive and confrontational, but he learned that casinos couldn't operate without cooperative relationships with organized labor. This experience taught him lessons about negotiating with powerful organizations that he would later apply in other business situations. Union contracts typically included generous benefits and wage increases that added significantly to operating costs. By 1990, Trump owned 3 major Atlantic City casinos and had become one of the most prominent figures in the gaming industry. His properties employed thousands of people, generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and established him as a major business figure beyond real estate development. But the casino business also exposed Trump to much higher levels of financial risk than his previous ventures. The casinos were capital-intensive operations that required constant investment in maintenance, upgrades, and marketing to remain competitive. The high debt levels required to finance Trump's casinos made his entire business empire vulnerable to economic downturns, changes in consumer spending, or increased competition. Unlike real estate development, where buildings could be sold or refinanced if projects struggled, casinos were specialized properties that had limited value outside the gambling industry. This meant that problems with casino operations could threaten Trump's other businesses. The casino industry was also subject to regulatory changes that could dramatically affect profitability without warning. Trump's casino marketing also required him to cultivate relationships with high-roller gamblers, many of whom came from international backgrounds or had business connections that attracted regulatory scrutiny. The casino industry brought Trump into contact with characters and situations that were very different from the real estate world, exposing him to potential controversies that could damage his reputation or create legal problems. Some high-roller customers had connections to organized crime or foreign governments that created additional regulatory complications. The competitive environment in Atlantic City became increasingly challenging as more casinos opened and the market became saturated. Trump's properties faced competition from newer, larger casinos that offered more modern amenities and better locations. The rising competition made it difficult to maintain the revenue levels needed to service the massive debts that financed Trump's casino empire. Atlantic City's overall casino revenues began declining in the late 1980s as other states legalized gambling and provided more convenient alternatives for customers. Trump's casino empire also required him to master new forms of entertainment and celebrity management. He hosted major boxing matches, including bouts featuring Mike Tyson, and attracted famous entertainers to perform at his properties. These events were expensive to produce, but generated enormous media attention and helped establish Trump as a major figure in entertainment and sports, as well as real estate and gambling. The casino business also exposed Trump to new forms of financial analysis and cash flow management. Unlike real estate, where revenues were relatively predictable, casino revenues fluctuated based on customer luck, weather, economic conditions, and seasonal factors. Trump learned to analyze daily, weekly, and monthly revenue patterns to optimize staffing, marketing, and operational decisions. Trump's experience with casino regulators also taught him valuable lessons about dealing with government agencies and maintaining compliance with complex regulations. The Casino Control Commission's oversight was more intensive than anything he had encountered in real estate, requiring detailed reporting and justification of business decisions that would have been private in other industries. The international customers attracted to Trump's casinos also provided him with early exposure to global business relationships and foreign investment patterns. Wealthy gamblers from Asia, Latin America, and Europe brought different cultural perspectives and business practices that broadened Trump's understanding of international markets. The casino industry's emphasis on customer service and hospitality also influenced Trump's approach to other businesses. He learned how to create experiences that would encourage customers to spend more money and return repeatedly, skills that would prove valuable in his hotel and entertainment ventures. But here's what most people never understood about Trump's casino empire. It wasn't primarily designed to make money from gambling operations. It was designed to establish Trump as a national celebrity whose personal brand could be leveraged for opportunities beyond Atlantic City. The casinos provided a platform for media attention, celebrity associations, and business relationships that would prove more valuable than their actual gambling revenues. Service, let alone produce profits for Trump's other investments. The casino needed to generate approximately $1.3 million per day just to meet its debt obligations, a target that proved difficult to achieve consistently. Trump's casino operations also introduced him to a different regulatory environment than he had encountered in real estate development. New Jersey's Casino Control Commission required extensive background checks, financial disclosures, and ongoing oversight that limited Trump's flexibility in managing his businesses. He had to prove not only that he could operate casinos effectively, but also that he met the state's standards for character and financial responsibility. The regulatory process was expensive and time-consuming, requiring teams of lawyers and accountants to maintain compliance with complex gaming regulations. The casino business also required Trump to develop relationships with labor unions, since most casino employees were unionized, and strikes could shut down operations completely. Trump's approach to union negotiations was typically aggressive and confrontational, but he learned that casinos couldn't operate without cooperative relationships with organized labor. This experience taught him lessons about negotiating with powerful organizations that he would later apply in other business situations. Union contracts typically included generous benefits and wage increases that added significantly to operating costs. By 1990, Trump owned 3 major Atlantic City casinos and had become one of the most prominent figures in the gaming industry. His properties employed thousands of people, generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and established him as a major business figure beyond real estate development. But the casino business also exposed Trump to much higher levels of financial risk than his previous ventures. The casinos were capital-intensive operations that required constant investment in maintenance, upgrades, and marketing to remain competitive. The high debt levels required to finance Trump's casinos made his entire business empire vulnerable to economic downturns, changes in consumer spending, or increased competition. Unlike real estate development, where buildings could be sold or refinanced if projects struggled, casinos were specialized properties that had limited value outside the gambling industry. This meant that problems with casino operations could threaten Trump's other businesses. The casino industry was also subject to regulatory changes that could dramatically affect profitability without warning. Trump's casino marketing also required him to cultivate relationships with high-roller gamblers, many of whom came from international backgrounds or had business connections that attracted regulatory scrutiny. The casino industry brought Trump into contact with characters and situations that were very different from the real estate world, exposing him to potential controversies that could damage his reputation or create legal problems. Some high-roller customers had connections to organized crime or foreign governments that created additional regulatory complications. The competitive environment in Atlantic City became increasingly challenging as more casinos opened and the market became saturated. Trump's properties faced competition from newer, larger casinos that offered more modern amenities and better locations. The rising competition made it difficult to maintain the revenue levels needed to service the massive debts that financed Trump's casino empire. Atlantic City's overall casino revenues began declining in the late 1980s as other states legalized gambling and provided more convenient alternatives for customers. But here's what most people never understood about Trump's casino empire. It wasn't primarily designed to make money from gambling operations. It was designed to establish Trump as a national celebrity whose personal brand could be leveraged for opportunities beyond Atlantic City. The casinos provided a platform for media attention, celebrity associations, and business relationships that would prove more valuable than their actual gambling revenues. The near collapse, when Trump almost lost everything. By 1990, Donald Trump's business empire appeared unstoppable from the outside. But internally, it was facing a financial crisis that threatened to destroy everything he had built. The combination of high debt levels from his casino developments, declining real estate values in Manhattan, and personal guarantees that put his entire wealth at risk created a perfect storm that brought Trump closer to bankruptcy than most people ever realized. What saved him wasn't just financial restructuring, it was his understanding of how to manage public perception during a crisis. Trump owed approximately $3.4 billion to more than 70 banks, with personal guarantees exceeding $800 million that made him liable for massive debts if his businesses failed. The fundamental problem with Trump's business model was that he had used massive amounts of borrowed money to finance projects that generated impressive revenues but relatively small profit margins. His casinos had debt service requirements that consumed most of their cash flow. His real estate projects were mortgaged to levels that left little room for economic downturns, and he had personally guaranteed loans that made him liable for hundreds of millions of dollars if his businesses failed. The Trump Taj Mahal alone required approximately $1.3 million per day just to meet its debt obligations, while generating only marginally higher revenues on good days. When Atlantic City casino revenues began declining in 1989 due to increased competition and economic recession, Trump's entire financial structure began to unravel. The Trump Taj Mahal, which was supposed to be his crowning achievement, was losing money from the day it opened because its debt service exceeded its operating profits. The other two casinos were also struggling, and Trump was facing the possibility of defaulting on over $3 billion in business loans and personal guarantees. His personal expenses exceeded $8 million annually, including maintenance costs for his yacht, airplane, and multiple residences. The crisis became public in 1990 when news reports revealed that Trump was having difficulty making debt payments and was negotiating with banks to restructure his loans. For someone whose business model depended on projecting success and confidence, these revelations were potentially devastating. Investors might refuse to work with him, lenders might demand immediate repayment, and his carefully constructed celebrity image could collapse overnight. The New York tabloids began running headlines about Trump's financial problems, creating a media narrative that threatened to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Trump's response to the financial crisis demonstrated his understanding of how media attention could be used as a business tool even during disasters. Instead of trying to hide his problems or minimize their significance, he cooperated with reporters and positioned himself as a victim of economic circumstances beyond his control. He gave interviews explaining how the recession and increased competition had created unexpected challenges, while emphasizing his track record of successful developments. This strategy helped maintain public sympathy and prevented the complete collapse of his reputation. The bank negotiations required Trump to accept significant restrictions on his lifestyle and business operations. He agreed to live on a personal allowance of $450,000 per month, which sounds generous, but represented a dramatic reduction from his previous spending levels. He also had to accept bank oversight of his major business decisions and agree to sell various assets to reduce his debt levels. The banks appointed financial monitors to oversee his spending and required detailed reporting of all business activities. One of the most significant aspects of Trump's financial restructuring was convincing his lenders that his personal brand had value that justified keeping him involved in his businesses, rather than forcing him into bankruptcy. Trump argued that properties with his name attached generated higher revenues than similar properties without celebrity associations, making him more valuable as a partner than as a debtor, to be eliminated through foreclosure proceedings. This argument proved persuasive because the banks realized that forcing Trump into bankruptcy would likely reduce the value of the properties they held as collateral. The negotiation process also revealed Trump's skill at playing different lenders against each other. Because so many banks had made loans secured by Trump properties, none of them wanted to trigger a general collapse that would hurt all the lenders simultaneously. Trump used this situation to negotiate more favorable terms than he might have achieved if he had been dealing with a single creditor. He convinced the banks that they were better off working together to restructure his debts than competing to recover their individual loans through foreclosure. During this period, Trump was forced to sell his airline, his yacht, and various smaller properties to raise cash and reduce his debt burden. These sales were personally painful because they represented visible symbols of his success. But they also provided valuable lessons about the difference between assets that generated cash flow and assets that were primarily for show. This experience influenced his later business decisions about when to buy and sell trophy properties. The Trump Shuttle airline was sold back to U.S. Airways. The Trump Princess yacht was sold to Saudi Prince Al Walid, and several smaller real estate properties were liquidated. The financial crisis also forced Trump to become more involved in the day-to-day operations of his businesses, rather than focusing primarily on new developments and publicity. He learned details about cash flow management, cost control, and operational efficiency that he had previously left to subordinates. These skills would prove valuable when he later regained financial stability and resumed expansion. Trump discovered that many of his properties were being operated inefficiently, with excessive staffing levels and unnecessary expenses that could be reduced without affecting customer satisfaction. Trump's ability to maintain his public profile during the financial crisis was crucial to his eventual recovery. He continued to appear at social events, give interviews, and maintain relationships with media figures who could influence public perception of his situation. This strategy ensured that when his businesses stabilized, he would still be positioned as a major celebrity businessman rather than someone who had failed and disappeared from public view. He understood that maintaining visibility was essential for the licensing deals and celebrity opportunities that would drive his future recovery. The restructuring process took several years to complete, but by 1993, Trump had regained control of his businesses and eliminated most of the personal guarantees that had threatened his survival. The experience taught him valuable lessons about financial risk management, but it also demonstrated that his personal brand and media relationships were as valuable as his actual business assets. He emerged from the crisis with a more conservative approach to debt financing, but also with a deeper understanding of how celebrity status could be converted into business opportunities. Trump's relationship with his creditors during the crisis also provided him with insights into how large financial institutions operated and made decisions. He learned that banks were often more interested in avoiding losses than in maximizing returns, and that they could be persuaded to accept restructured deals that looked better on paper than the realistic alternatives. These lessons would prove valuable in his later business dealings, and would influence his approach to negotiation in various contexts. The crisis period also taught Trump valuable lessons about managing multiple businesses simultaneously while dealing with cash flow problems. He learned to prioritize which properties and projects were most important for his long-term recovery, and which assets could be sacrificed to preserve his core business interests. This experience would influence his later approach to business portfolio management. Trump's personal life during the crisis was also significantly affected, as his marriage to Ivana Trump ended in a highly publicized divorce that coincided with his financial problems. The divorce proceedings attracted enormous media attention and provided additional insights into Trump's business operations and personal wealth. The settlement required Trump to make substantial payments to Ivana, while his businesses were struggling with cash flow problems. The experience of nearly losing everything also influenced Trump's psychological approach to risk and success. He developed a more nuanced understanding of how quickly business fortunes could change, and how important it was to maintain flexibility and multiple options in uncertain situations. This perspective would influence his later business strategies and political approaches. The crisis also demonstrated Trump's resilience and ability to maintain focus under extreme pressure. While facing potential financial ruin, he continued to negotiate complex deals, manage multiple business operations, and maintain his public image. This ability to function effectively during crisis situations would prove valuable throughout his later career. Trump's recovery from the financial crisis also provided him with credibility among other business leaders who had faced similar challenges. He joined an informal network of executives who had survived major business crises, providing access to advice and support that would be valuable in future challenging situations. But here's what nobody talks about regarding Trump's near bankruptcy. It wasn't just a financial crisis. It was a masterclass in using publicity and personal relationships to survive business disasters. Trump learned that in crisis situations, managing perception was as important as managing cash flow, and that lesson would influence his approach to controversies throughout the rest of his career. Learned that in crisis situations, managing perception was as important as managing cash flow, and that lesson would influence his approach to controversies throughout the rest of his career. The Phoenix Rises, reinventing Trump in the 1990s. Trump's recovery from his early 1990s financial crisis required more than just restructuring debt and selling assets. It required completely reinventing his business model and public image. The traditional approach of borrowing massive amounts of money to build expensive properties had nearly destroyed him, so Trump needed to find ways to generate revenue and rebuild his wealth without taking on the same levels of financial risk. His solution was to transform his name into a brand that could be licensed to other developers and businesses around the world. This pivot from actual development to brand licensing represented a fundamental shift from owning assets to monetizing reputation, a strategy that would prove more profitable and less risky than traditional real estate development. The licensing model was revolutionary for the real estate industry. Instead of building properties himself, Trump would allow other developers to use his name on their projects in exchange for upfront fees and ongoing royalty payments. This approach required much less capital investment from Trump while generating steady income streams that weren't dependent on the success or failure of individual developments. It also allowed him to expand internationally without the regulatory and financial complications of direct foreign investment. The typical licensing deal provided Trump with 2 to 5% of gross revenues plus substantial upfront payments, generating millions of dollars with minimal risk or capital investment. Trump's first major licensing deal was for a condominium project in New York called Trump International Hotel and Tower. The building was actually developed by other investors, but Trump's involvement in design, marketing, and management justified putting his name on the property. The project was successful and demonstrated that the Trump brand had value independent of Trump's personal financial investment in projects. The building's success proved that developers were willing to pay substantial fees for access to Trump's name and marketing expertise, even when he wasn't providing construction financing. The success of the licensing model encouraged Trump to apply the same approach to golf courses, hotels, and residential developments around the world. Developers in countries like South Korea, Panama, and Turkey were willing to pay substantial fees for the right to use Trump's name because they believed it would help them attract customers and generate media attention for their projects. This international expansion made Trump wealthy again while requiring relatively little risk on his part. Golf course licensing deals were particularly profitable, often generating several million dollars annually, with minimal ongoing involvement from Trump. Trump's recovery also coincided with the rise of celebrity culture and reality television, trends that he understood and exploited better than most business figures. The 1990s saw increased public interest in the lifestyles of wealthy people, and Trump positioned himself as someone who embodied success, luxury, and the American dream. He appeared on television shows, gave interviews to lifestyle magazines, and maintained a public profile that kept his name in the media. His relationship with Howard Stern's radio show provided a regular platform for self-promotion and celebrity gossip that enhanced his public profile. The real estate market recovery in the mid-1990s also helped Trump regain his footing as a developer. Property values in Manhattan began rising again, making his existing assets more valuable and creating opportunities for new projects. Trump was able to refinance properties at lower interest rates, generate cash from improving property values, and gradually reduce his debt levels to more manageable amounts. The improving market conditions allowed him to demonstrate that his earlier problems were caused by economic circumstances rather than fundamental business incompetence. One of Trump's most important projects during this period was converting the former Hotel Pierre apartment building into luxury condominiums. The project required sophisticated understanding of Manhattan's luxury real estate market and demonstrated Trump's ability to identify properties that could be transformed into much more valuable assets. The success of this conversion established Trump as a major player in Manhattan's ultra-high-end residential market. The project generated over $100 million in sales, while requiring minimal capital investment from Trump, proving that his market instincts remained sharp despite his earlier financial problems. Trump's approach to marketing during the recovery period was more sophisticated than his earlier efforts. He understood that wealthy customers wanted exclusivity and privacy rather than publicity and attention, so he developed marketing strategies that emphasized quality, craftsmanship, and discretion. This approach attracted customers who might have been put off by Trump's previous reputation for flashy self-promotion. He learned to adapt his communication style to different audiences, using aggressive marketing for some projects while employing subtle, understated approaches for others. The 1990s also saw Trump develop relationships with international investors and customers who were looking for safe places to invest money outside their home countries. Manhattan real estate appealed to wealthy individuals from Asia, Latin America, and Eastern Europe, who wanted to diversify their investments and potentially obtain U.S. residency through property ownership. Trump's properties became popular choices for this type of international investment. his sales staff learned to work with interpreters and understand the preferences of customers from different cultural backgrounds. Trump's recovery required him to develop better relationships with traditional financial institutions, rather than relying on high-risk lenders and junk bond financing. He learned to present his projects in ways that satisfied conservative underwriting standards, while still generating the returns needed to rebuild his wealth. This meant accepting lower levels of financial leverage, but also reducing his exposure to market downturns. His relationship with Deutsche Bank became particularly important, as they were willing to provide financing for his projects when other major banks remained skeptical. The licensing business also taught Trump valuable lessons about international markets and cultural differences in how luxury goods and services are marketed. He learned that the Trump brand meant different things in different countries, and that successful international expansion required adapting to local preferences while maintaining consistent quality standards. Some markets valued Trump's association with American success and celebrity culture, while others were more interested in his reputation for luxury and exclusivity. During this period, Trump also began developing the relationship with media that would eventually lead to The Apprentice and his transformation into a television personality. He understood that maintaining public visibility was essential for the licensing business, since other developers were primarily paying for access to his celebrity status and media attention. He cultivated relationships with entertainment reporters, lifestyle journalists, and television producers who could provide ongoing publicity for his brand. Trump's personal life during the 1990s also contributed to his media profile and business recovery. His divorce from Ivana Trump had generated enormous tabloid coverage, and his subsequent relationships with Marla Maples and other celebrities kept him in gossip columns and entertainment media. While this attention was sometimes negative, it maintained his visibility and reinforced his image as someone who lived an exciting, glamorous lifestyle that people wanted to emulate. The 1990s recovery period also saw Trump develop new business partnerships and investment strategies that reduced his dependence on traditional real estate development. He explored opportunities in entertainment, sports, and media that could leverage his celebrity status while requiring less capital investment than building construction. These ventures provided diversification that made his overall business portfolio less vulnerable to real estate market cycles. Trump's relationship with New York City government also evolved during this period, as he learned to work more cooperatively with city officials while still advocating aggressively for his business interests. The near-bankruptcy experience had taught him the importance of maintaining positive relationships with political figures who could help or hurt his projects through regulatory decisions and tax policies. The recovery process also involved rebuilding Trump's relationships with the financial and business communities that had been strained during his crisis period. He worked to demonstrate that his financial problems had been resolved and that he was once again a reliable partner for major business ventures. This reputation rehabilitation was essential for attracting the licensing partners and investment opportunities that drove his recovery. Trump's approach to risk management also evolved during the 1990s, as he developed more sophisticated methods for evaluating and controlling the potential downside of business ventures. He learned to structure deals that limited his exposure to losses while still providing opportunities for substantial profits, a more conservative approach than his earlier high-leverage strategies. But here's what most people don't realize about Trump's 1990s recovery. It wasn't just about rebuilding his wealth. It was about creating a business model that could generate income without requiring the massive capital investments and personal financial guarantees that had nearly bankrupted him. This transformation from developer to brand manager would become the foundation for everything Trump achieved in the following decades. The art of celebrity, from real estate to reality TV. The transformation of Donald Trump from real estate developer to television personality represented a fundamental shift in how business celebrities could leverage media attention for profit. When The Apprentice premiered on NBC in January 2004, it wasn't just another reality show. It was a carefully constructed platform that transformed Trump's business reputation into an entertainment property worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The show's success demonstrated Trump's understanding that in modern America, celebrity status could be more valuable than any physical asset. The initial contract with NBC guaranteed Trump $1 million per episode, but the show's real value was in reinforcing his personal brand and creating new business opportunities beyond television. The concept for The Apprentice emerged from Trump's recognition that public fascination with business success could be packaged as entertainment. Reality television was becoming increasingly popular in the early 2000s, but most shows focused on dating, survival challenges, or lifestyle transformations. Trump's show was different because it combined entertainment with business education, allowing viewers to learn about entrepreneurship while watching contestants compete for the opportunity to work in Trump's organization. The show's format was based on elimination-style competition, but the tasks were designed to showcase real business skills and challenges. Mark Burnett, the show's producer, understood that Trump's personality was perfect for television because he could project authority and confidence while remaining entertaining and unpredictable. Unlike other business figures who might seem boring or overly technical on camera, Trump had natural charisma and an instinct for creating dramatic moments that would keep viewers engaged. His famous catchphrase, "You're fired," became a cultural phenomenon that transcended the show itself. The phrase was carefully crafted to be memorable, decisive, and slightly intimidating, perfectly capturing Trump's business persona. The financial structure of The Apprentice was brilliantly designed to benefit Trump in multiple ways. He received substantial payment for appearing on the show, but more importantly, the program served as a weekly advertisement for Trump's business empire and personal brand. Every episode featured Trump Tower, showcased Trump properties, and reinforced his image as a successful businessman who could teach others about achieving wealth and success. The show essentially provided Trump with free marketing worth millions of dollars per episode, while also paying him to participate. What made The Apprentice revolutionary wasn't just its entertainment value. It was how the show integrated product placement and business promotion in ways that viewers accepted as part of the entertainment experience. Tasks often involved promoting real businesses, contestants visited Trump properties, and the show's format naturally highlighted Trump's various business interests without seeming like traditional advertising. This integration generated additional revenue streams while building the Trump brand. Corporate sponsors paid millions to have their products featured in tasks, creating a three-way benefit for NBC, Trump, and the sponsoring companies. The show's casting process was designed to create maximum drama and viewer engagement. Contestants were selected not just for their business skills, but for their personalities, backgrounds, and potential for conflict with other participants. The mix of different ages, ethnicities, educational backgrounds, and professional experiences ensured that viewers could identify with various contestants, while creating natural tensions that drove storylines. Casting directors specifically looked for contestants who would generate strong emotional reactions from viewers, either positive or negative. Trump's performance on the show demonstrated his sophisticated understanding of television production and audience psychology. He learned to vary his demeanor between episodes, sometimes appearing tough and demanding, other times seeming mentoring and supportive. This variety kept viewers uncertain about how he would react to different situations, creating suspense that maintained audience interest throughout each season. Trump also understood the importance of creating quotable moments and memorable scenes that would be discussed in media coverage and social media conversations. The boardroom sequences, where Trump eliminated contestants, became the show's signature moments and showcased Trump's ability to create compelling television through a combination of business analysis and personal drama. He learned to ask questions that would reveal character flaws, create conflicts between contestants, and build to dramatic elimination decisions that would surprise viewers and generate discussion. The boardroom was specifically designed to be intimidating and formal, with Trump positioned as the ultimate authority figure who could determine contestants' fates. The Apprentice also provided Trump with valuable market research about public perceptions of business success and leadership. The show's ratings, viewer demographics, and audience feedback gave him insights into what qualities people admired in business leaders and what types of business advice resonated with different audiences. This information influenced his later political messaging and campaign strategies. Nielsen ratings showed that the show was particularly popular with middle-class viewers who aspired to business success, providing Trump with crucial data about his potential political constituency. The international success of The Apprentice format, which was adapted for television markets around the world, demonstrated the global appeal of Trump's business persona and teaching style. Versions of the show were produced in dozens of countries, with local business celebrities taking Trump's role but using his basic format and approach. This international expansion further enhanced Trump's global brand recognition. The format was licensed in over 20 countries, generating additional revenue while spreading Trump's business philosophy to international audiences. The show's success also attracted criticism from business educators and management experts, who argued that Trump's approach to leadership was more about entertainment than sound business practices. Critics pointed out that the show's emphasis on conflict, dramatic firings, and winner-take-all competition didn't reflect how successful businesses actually operated in collaborative, team-oriented environments. However, these criticisms didn't affect the show's popularity or its effectiveness as a platform for Trump's personal brand. Despite these criticisms, The Apprentice was enormously successful for NBC and established Trump as one of the most recognizable business personalities in America. The show ran for 14 seasons, generated hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and created a platform that Trump could use to promote his other business interests, express political opinions, and maintain constant media attention. The show's success also spawned spin-offs, including Celebrity Apprentice, which featured famous participants competing for charity rather than employment. The celebrity status that Trump gained from The Apprentice also opened doors to business opportunities that wouldn't have been available to him as just a real estate developer. He was invited to speak at business conferences, write books about success and entrepreneurship, and participate in ventures with other celebrities and major corporations. The show transformed him from a New York businessman into a national brand. Speaking fees for corporate events reached $100,000 per appearance, while book deals generated millions in additional revenue. Trump's social media usage during the Apprentice years demonstrated his early understanding of how digital platforms could be used to maintain direct communication with fans and customers without traditional media intermediaries. He began using Twitter aggressively to promote the show, share business advice, and comment on current events, building a following that would prove crucial for his later political career. By 2015, Trump had accumulated over 10 million Twitter followers, providing him with a direct communication channel to potential voters. But here's what nobody talks about regarding The Apprentice. It wasn't just entertainment, it was Trump's graduate school education in mass communication and public persuasion. Every episode taught him lessons about holding audience attention, creating emotional connections with viewers, and using television to influence public opinion on a scale that would prepare him for political campaigning in the digital age. The political awakening, from boardroom to ballot box. Donald Trump's entry into serious political discourse didn't begin with his 2016 presidential campaign. It started decades earlier through a combination of celebrity status, business relationships with political figures, and growing frustration with government policies that affected his business interests. By the early 2000s, Trump had developed strong opinions about trade deals, immigration policy, and foreign relations that would eventually form the foundation of his political platform. His transformation from entertainment figure to political commentator was gradual but deliberate, building on his understanding of how media attention could be converted into influence and power beyond the business world. Trump's business empire had given him direct experience with how government policies affected private sector success. His real estate developments required navigating complex regulatory environments. His international licensing deals exposed him to trade policies and currency fluctuations, and his casino operations brought him into contact with labor unions and gaming regulations. These experiences shaped his views about the relationship between government and business in ways that differed from politicians who had spent their careers in public service. He witnessed firsthand how regulatory changes could cost businesses millions of dollars, and how political connections could expedite or delay major projects. The 2008 financial crisis and its aftermath convinced Trump that America's political establishment was failing to protect middle-class jobs and economic prosperity. While politicians debated stimulus packages and bank bailouts, Trump observed how these policies affected real estate markets, small businesses, and working-class communities. He began speaking publicly about his belief that American trade deals were poorly negotiated, and that foreign countries were taking advantage of American generosity. His criticism focused particularly on China's trade practices and NAFTA's impact on American manufacturing jobs. Trump's criticism of President Barack Obama's policies went beyond typical partisan disagreement. It represented a fundamental challenge to how political discourse was conducted in America. Trump used Twitter to express opinions that conventional politicians would never voice publicly, including conspiracy theories about Obama's birthplace and qualifications for office. These controversial statements generated enormous media attention and established Trump as a political figure who couldn't be ignored. His Twitter following grew from thousands to millions as people shared and debated his increasingly provocative political commentary. The birther conspiracy theory that Trump's promoted from 2011 to 2017 revealed his understanding of how doubt and suspicion could be used as political weapons. Even after Obama released his birth certificate, Trump continued to question its authenticity and raise other doubts about Obama's background. This campaign wasn't based on factual evidence, but it demonstrated Trump's ability to maintain public attention and influence political narratives through persistent repetition of controversial claims. The birther issue generated hundreds of millions of dollars worth of media coverage, while positioning Trump as Obama's most prominent critic. Trump's 2012 consideration of a presidential run provided him with valuable experience in political campaigning and media management. Although he ultimately decided not to run, the exploration process taught him about primary election dynamics, fundraising requirements, and the types of messages that resonated with Republican voters. He learned that his celebrity status and business success gave him credibility with voters who were frustrated with traditional politicians. The 2012 exploration also introduced him to key Republican operatives and donors, who would later support his 2016 campaign. The success of The Apprentice had also given Trump a platform for expressing political opinions and testing public reactions to his ideas. He used appearances on the show and related media events to discuss his views on trade, immigration, and foreign policy. These expressions of political opinion were generally well received by the show's audience, suggesting that Trump's political views had broader appeal than conventional wisdom suggested. Market research showed that his television audience included many working-class Americans who felt disconnected from both major political parties. Trump's business relationships had also connected him with political figures from both parties, giving him insights into how Washington actually operated behind closed doors. He had contributed to campaigns, attended political fundraising events, and developed personal relationships with elected officials who sought his support and advice. These experiences convinced him that many politicians were more concerned with maintaining their positions than solving national problems. He observed how campaign contributors could gain access to elected officials and influence policy decisions through strategic donations and relationship building. The 2014 midterm elections, which saw Republicans gain control of both houses of Congress, convinced Trump that American voters were ready for more aggressive challenges to the Obama administration's policies. He observed that candidates who took strong positions on immigration and trade were more successful than those who tried to appeal to moderate voters with compromise positions. This analysis influenced his decision to focus on divisive issues that would energize core supporters rather than seeking broad consensus on more moderate positions. Trump's decision to seriously consider running for president in 2016 was influenced by his belief that none of the likely Republican candidates had the communication skills or business experience needed to defeat Hillary Clinton and implement conservative policies effectively. He believed his celebrity status, business success, and willingness to challenge political correctness would give him advantages that traditional politicians lacked. His media relationships and social media following provided him with communication platforms that other candidates would need to build from scratch. The early stages of Trump's presidential exploration involved testing whether his political messages would resonate beyond his existing fan base from The Apprentice and his business career. He began giving speeches at conservative political events, participating in television interviews about political topics, and using social media to build a following among Republican activists and primary voters. These activities generated increasing media attention and demonstrated that Trump could attract audiences and generate excitement around political themes. Trump's approach to political messaging was fundamentally different from conventional campaign strategies. Instead of carefully crafted policy positions developed by teams of advisors, Trump relied on instinctive reactions to current events and direct communication with voters through social media. This approach was riskier than traditional campaigning, but it also allowed him to respond quickly to changing circumstances and maintain constant media attention. His messages were designed to generate emotional reactions rather than intellectual analysis, appealing to voters' feelings about economic anxiety and cultural change. Trump's political evolution was also influenced by his observations about how successful media personalities and business leaders had used controversy and conflict to build their brands. He studied how figures like Howard Stern, Rush Limbaugh, and other controversial media personalities had converted notoriety into influence and wealth. This analysis convinced him that being universally liked was less valuable than being intensely supported by a dedicated audience, even if that meant being intensely disliked by others. The international business relationships that Trump had developed through his licensing deals also influenced his political views about American foreign policy and trade relationships. He had observed how other countries protected their domestic industries and negotiated more favorable terms for their businesses, leading him to believe that American negotiators were insufficiently aggressive in protecting American interests. These observations would later form the basis for his America First foreign policy approach. Trump's growing political involvement also coincided with changes in media consumption patterns that favored his communication style. The rise of social media, 24-hour cable news, and online political discussion created an environment where controversial statements could reach large audiences immediately and generate ongoing discussion that maintained attention for days or weeks. His political commentary during this period also attracted criticism from Republican establishment figures who were concerned about his impact on the party's reputation and electoral prospects. However, Trump's ability to generate media attention and attract new supporters to Republican events demonstrated that he had identified an underserved constituency within the party. Trump's business experience during economic downturns also influenced his political views about government spending and fiscal policy. Having survived his own financial crisis in the 1990s, He understood how debt levels could create vulnerability and limit flexibility during challenging periods. This experience informed his criticism of government deficit spending and national debt levels. The success of Trump's political commentary also attracted attention from political consultants and media strategists, who recognized his potential as a candidate or political influencer. He began receiving advice from experienced political operatives who helped him understand how to translate his media success into political power. Trump's international celebrity status, enhanced by The Apprentice and his licensing deals, also gave him a global platform for expressing political opinions that reached audiences beyond American voters. His comments about American foreign policy and trade relationships were covered by international media outlets, giving him influence in global political discussions. But here's what nobody understood about Trump's political evolution. It wasn't a sudden transformation from businessman to politician. It was the culmination of decades of observing how government policies affected his business interests, and growing conviction that America needed leadership with private sector experience rather than career politicians who had never created jobs or managed large organizations. The Outsiders Campaign, disrupting the political establishment. When Donald Trump announced his presidential candidacy on June 16, 2015, descending the golden escalator at Trump Tower, political experts across America dismissed his campaign as a publicity stunt that would collapse within months. What they failed to understand was that Trump had been preparing for this moment for years, studying political communication, building a media platform, and developing messages that would resonate with voters who felt abandoned by both political parties. His campaign announcement wasn't just another reality TV moment. It was the launch of a carefully planned assault on the American political establishment that would fundamentally change how campaigns are conducted. The speech generated over $400 million worth of free media coverage in its first week, more than most presidential campaigns achieve in entire election cycles. Trump's announcement speech was deliberately designed to generate maximum controversy and media attention. His comments about Mexican immigrants, trade deals, and political corruption were intended to dominate news coverage and establish him as a candidate who would say things that other politicians wouldn't dare express. Within hours, his campaign had generated more media coverage than most candidates achieve in months of traditional campaigning. The controversial nature of his remarks ensured that every major news outlet would cover his announcement, providing free publicity worth millions of dollars while establishing him as the most talked-about candidate in the race. The Republican primary field included 17 candidates, many of whom had spent years preparing for presidential campaigns with experienced political teams, substantial fundraising operations, and detailed policy platforms. Trump's approach was completely different. He relied on free media coverage, social media communication, and large rallies that generated excitement and demonstrated popular support without requiring traditional campaign infrastructure. While other candidates spent millions on television advertisements and direct mail campaigns, Trump dominated news coverage through controversial statements and dramatic rallies that attracted massive crowds and television coverage. Trump's rally strategy was revolutionary for modern political campaigning. Instead of small, carefully controlled events designed to avoid mistakes, Trump held massive rallies in sports arenas and convention centers that attracted thousands of supporters and generated extensive television coverage. These events served multiple purposes. They demonstrated Trump's popularity, provided content for social media, and allowed him to test messages and refine his communication style. The rallies also created a sense of movement and momentum that traditional campaign events couldn't match, with supporters waiting hours in line to attend events that felt more like rock concerts than political speeches. The media's response to Trump's campaign inadvertently helped his candidacy by providing billions of dollars worth of free coverage. Television networks discovered that Trump appearances generated higher ratings than other political programming, so they broadcast his rallies live and devoted extensive time to analyzing his controversial statements. This coverage crowded out other candidates and reinforced Trump's position as the most important figure in the Republican primary. Studies later showed that Trump received nearly $2 billion worth of free media coverage during the primary campaign, far exceeding the paid advertising budgets of all other candidates combined. Trump's use of Twitter during the campaign transformed political communication by allowing him to respond instantly to news events, criticize opponents, and communicate directly with voters without traditional media filters. His tweets often generated news coverage that dominated political discussion for days, giving him the ability to control political narratives and keep opponents on the defensive. Each controversial tweet would generate dozens of news stories, cable television debates, and social media discussions that kept Trump at the center of political conversation while his opponents struggled to gain attention for their policy proposals. The primary debates showcased Trump's television skills and his understanding of how to create memorable moments that would be replayed repeatedly in news coverage. His attacks on other candidates were personal and dramatic, designed to generate emotional reactions rather than policy discussions. This approach was criticized as unpresidential, but it was highly effective at establishing Trump as the dominant personality on stage. His nicknames for opponents, Low Energy Jeb, Little Marco, Lion Ted, became part of political vocabulary and demonstrated his ability to brand and diminish competitors through memorable characterizations. Trump's campaign messaging was carefully crafted to appeal to voters who felt that globalization and technological change had harmed their economic prospects. His promises to renegotiate trade deals, build a border wall, and bring manufacturing jobs back to America addressed concerns that other politicians had largely ignored. These messages resonated particularly strongly with working-class voters in industrial states who had supported Democrats in previous elections. Polling data showed that Trump's core supporters were concentrated in areas that had experienced economic decline due to factory closures and job losses to international competition. The campaign's approach to fundraising was also unconventional. While other candidates spent enormous amounts of time courting wealthy donors and holding expensive fundraising events, Trump relied primarily on small donations from supporters and his own personal wealth. This approach allowed him to claim independence from special interests and wealthy contributors who might influence his policy decisions. Trump ultimately spent far less money than his primary opponents while achieving dramatically better results, demonstrating that free media coverage and grassroots enthusiasm could be more valuable than paid advertising and professional campaign operations. Trump's victory in the New Hampshire primary demonstrated that his campaign had genuine popular support rather than just media attention. The win provided momentum that helped him succeed in subsequent primaries and established him as the frontrunner for the Republican nomination. His ability to win with a plurality of votes in multi-candidate races showed that he had identified an underserved constituency within the Republican Party. Exit polls revealed that Trump supporters were motivated primarily by concerns about immigration, trade, and political corruption rather than traditional conservative issues like taxes and social policy. The campaign's digital strategy was more sophisticated than most observers realized. Trump's team used social media analytics to identify which messages generated the most engagement, targeted advertising to specific demographic groups, and coordinated online activities with traditional campaign events. This data-driven approach helped maximize the impact of limited resources and identify opportunities that other campaigns missed. The campaign's social media operations generated millions of shares, likes, and comments that amplified Trump's messages far beyond his direct followers. Trump's criticism of the Republican Party establishment created tensions with party leaders, but helped solidify his image as an outsider who would challenge the existing political system. His attacks on donors, lobbyists, and career politicians appealed to voters who believed that Washington was controlled by special interests rather than representing ordinary Americans. This anti-establishment messaging proved particularly effective with voters who had supported previous outsider candidates like Ross Perot and Patty Buchanan, demonstrating that there was a substantial constituency for candidates who challenged party orthodoxy. The campaign's organization was deliberately lean and flexible, allowing rapid responses to changing circumstances without the bureaucratic delays that affected more traditional campaigns. This nimbleness proved valuable when controversies arose or when opportunities emerged to exploit opponents' mistakes. While other campaigns required committee meetings and consultant approval for major decisions, Trump's operation could pivot quickly to take advantage of breaking news or changing political dynamics. Trump's rallies during the primary campaign also served as focus groups for testing messages and gauging audience reactions to different themes and approaches. He would try out different lines of attack against opponents, experiment with new policy proposals, and observe crowd reactions to determine which messages were most effective. This real-time feedback allowed him to refine his communication strategy continuously and develop messages that resonated strongly with his core supporters. But here's what political analysts never understood about Trump's 2016 primary campaign. It wasn't just about winning the Republican nomination. It was about completely restructuring how political campaigns are conducted and how candidates communicate with voters in the digital age. Every aspect of his campaign was designed to maximize media attention, build direct relationships with supporters, and demonstrate that celebrity status could be more powerful than traditional political experience. The improbable victory, defeating the Clinton machine. The 2016 general election between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton was supposed to be a foregone conclusion, according to virtually every political expert, polling organization, and media outlet in America. Clinton had decades of political experience, endorsements from major newspapers and political figures, a massive fundraising advantage, and the support of President Obama's political organization. Trump was a political novice facing multiple controversies who had never held elected office. What happened on November 8, 2016, represented one of the greatest upsets in American political history. Clinton entered Election Day with a 71% chance of victory, according to 538's polling model, while prediction markets gave Trump only a 15% chance of winning the presidency. Trump's path to victory required threading an electoral needle that seemed almost impossible given demographic trends and changing voter preferences. He needed to hold traditional Republican states while flipping industrial Midwest states that had voted Democratic in every presidential election since the 1990s. This strategy required appealing simultaneously to conservative Republicans and working-class Democrats, who had never before supported the same candidate. The campaign's internal polling identified 17 states as competitive, requiring Trump to win 16 of them to reach the 270 electoral votes needed for victory. The Clinton campaign's strategy was based on recreating the coalition that had elected Barack Obama twice: high turnout among minority voters, strong support from college-educated professionals, and solid performance in suburban areas. Clinton's team believed that Trump's controversial statements would motivate Democratic voters while making him unacceptable to moderate Republicans and independent voters. The campaign spent over $1.2 billion and employed more than 4,000 staff members, creating the largest and most expensive presidential campaign operation in history. Trump's approach to the general election campaign was fundamentally different from traditional Republican strategies. Instead of trying to appeal to the center and minimize controversial positions, he doubled down on the populist messages that had won him the Republican nomination. His campaign calculated that there were more disaffected working-class voters who could be motivated to vote than moderate voters who could be persuaded to switch parties. This strategy required identifying and mobilizing voters who had not participated in recent elections, a risky approach that contradicted conventional campaign wisdom. The campaign's resource allocation reflected this strategy. While Clinton spent heavily on television advertising in traditional swing states like Virginia and Colorado, Trump focused resources on rallies and ground organization in Rust Belt states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. His team believed that personal appearances and grassroots enthusiasm would be more effective than paid advertising for reaching their target voters. Trump held 323 campaign events compared to Clinton's 278, with many of Trump's rallies attracting crowds exceeding 10,000 people. Trump's rallies during the general election were larger and more energetic than Clinton's events, creating a visual narrative of momentum and excitement that influenced media coverage and voter perceptions. The stark contrast between Trump's packed arenas and Clinton's smaller, more controlled events suggested that Trump had more passionate supporters, even if polling showed Clinton ahead overall. This enthusiasm gap became a crucial factor in voter turnout, with Trump supporters demonstrating higher levels of motivation and commitment than Clinton supporters in key swing states. The role of social media in the 2016 election was unprecedented and favored Trump's communication style. His Twitter account had millions of followers who shared his messages organically, multiplying the reach of his campaign communications without additional cost. Clinton's social media presence, while professionally managed, generated less engagement and viral sharing among users. Trump's tweets were shared an average of 7,000 times each, while Clinton's averaged only 2,300 shares, demonstrating Trump's superior ability to generate organic social media engagement. External factors also influenced the election outcome in ways that benefited Trump. FBI Director James Comey's letter to Congress about Clinton's email investigation, sent just days before the election, created a news cycle that reminded voters of Clinton's potential legal problems. Russian interference activities, including social media manipulation and email hacking, created additional controversies that dominated late campaign coverage. The release of Clinton campaign Chairman John Podesta's emails provided ongoing negative stories that reinforced concerns about Clinton's trustworthiness. Trump's performance in the 3 presidential debates defied expectations by avoiding major mistakes and effectively attacking Clinton's record. While most observers believed Clinton won the debates on substance, Trump successfully reinforced his key campaign themes and avoided appearing unqualified or dangerous to voters who were considering supporting him despite their reservations. His debate performances were particularly effective with undecided voters, who saw him as more authentic and less scripted than Clinton. The campaign's final week featured Trump visiting multiple swing states per day, holding rallies that generated local media coverage and demonstrated his stamina and commitment. This schedule created an image of Trump as someone who was working harder than Clinton to earn votes, reinforcing his message that he would bring the same energy and dedication to the presidency. Trump held 14 rallies in the final week, compared to Clinton's 7, visiting Pennsylvania 3 times and Michigan twice in the campaign's final days. Election day results revealed that Trump had successfully assembled a coalition that political experts thought was impossible. He performed better than expected among working-class white voters, held Republican support despite party establishment opposition, and made unexpected gains among minority voters in certain regions. His margins in rural areas were larger than anticipated, while Clinton's advantages in urban areas were smaller than projected. Trump received 62.9 million votes, compared to Clinton's 65.8 million, but his support was more efficiently distributed across swing states. The Electoral College mathematics that gave Trump victory despite losing the popular vote reflected the geographic distribution of his support. His coalition was more efficiently distributed across competitive states, while Clinton's supporters were concentrated in states she won by large margins. This outcome highlighted the importance of campaign strategy and resource allocation in presidential elections. Trump won 30 states with 306 electoral votes, compared to Clinton's 20 states with 232 electoral votes. Trump's victory speech emphasized themes of unity and healing that contrasted with the divisive rhetoric of his campaign. This pivot suggested his understanding that governing would require different skills and approaches than campaigning, and that he needed to begin building relationships with Americans who had opposed his candidacy. The speech was notably different in tone from his campaign rallies, focusing on bringing the country together rather than attacking political opponents. The election results stunned political observers and revealed fundamental changes in American electoral coalitions. Trump's ability to win Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, states that had not voted Republican since the 1980s, demonstrated that traditional assumptions about electoral maps were no longer reliable. His success with working-class voters across racial lines suggested that economic concerns could override traditional partisan loyalties in ways that few analysts had anticipated. But here's what nobody predicted about Trump's 2016 victory. It wasn't just a rejection of Hillary Clinton or dissatisfaction with Obama's policies. It was a fundamental realignment of American political coalitions that demonstrated how economic anxiety and cultural change could overcome traditional partisan loyalties and create new electoral possibilities that would influence American politics for decades. The presidency that changed everything. Donald Trump's inauguration on January 20th, 2017, marked the beginning of a presidency that would challenge every assumption about how American government operates and how presidents communicate with the public. From his first day in office, Trump approached the presidency as an extension of his business career and celebrity persona, using unconventional methods to pursue policy goals and maintain public attention in ways that previous presidents had never attempted. His inauguration drew an estimated 300,000 to 600,000 people, while Trump claimed it was the largest inauguration crowd in history, setting the tone for a presidency that would be defined by disputes over facts and alternative interpretations of reality. The inaugural address itself set the tone for Trump's entire presidency with its stark assessment of American conditions and promise of dramatic change. His description of American carnage and pledge to put America first signaled that his administration would reject the diplomatic language and incremental policy changes that had characterized previous presidencies. This speech was designed to appeal directly to his supporters while challenging the political establishment. The address was notably shorter than most inaugural speeches at only 16 minutes, but it contained more controversial statements than most presidents make in entire terms. Trump's approach to staffing his administration reflected his business background and preference for loyalty over traditional qualifications. He appointed family members to senior positions, selected cabinet officials from private sector backgrounds, and maintained a smaller White House staff than previous presidents. This approach was intended to bring business efficiency to government operations, though it also created management challenges and ethical concerns. His son-in-law, Jared Kushner, was given responsibilities for Middle East peace, criminal justice reform, and government modernization, while daughter Ivanka Trump became an unofficial advisor on women's issues and workforce development. The administration's first major legislative priority was repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act, a promise that had been central to Trump's campaign. Despite Republican control of Congress, this effort failed due to internal party disagreements and the complexity of healthcare policy. This early setback taught Trump valuable lessons about the differences between business deal-making and legislative negotiation. The failure demonstrated that presidential power was more limited than Trump had expected, and that Congress retained significant independence even when controlled by his own party. Trump's use of Twitter as president transformed political communication and created a direct channel between the Oval Office and the American public. His tweets often drove news coverage, influenced stock markets, and shaped policy discussions in ways that bypassed traditional media filters. This communication strategy generated constant attention, but also created diplomatic incidents and legal challenges. Trump sent over 25,000 tweets during his presidency, averaging more than 17 per day, and reaching a combined audience of hundreds of millions of people. The administration's approach to immigration policy, including the travel ban affecting several Muslim-majority countries, and increased border enforcement, fulfilled campaign promises, but generated intense opposition and legal challenges. These policies demonstrated Trump's willingness to use executive power aggressively, even when facing resistance from federal courts and state governments. The travel ban was challenged in court over 40 times, while border wall construction faced legal and funding obstacles that limited its implementation. Trump's relationship with traditional allies and international institutions reflected his belief that previous presidents had made deals that disadvantaged American interests. His criticism of NATO, withdrawal from international agreements, and confrontational approach to trade negotiations created tensions with allies, but also forced renegotiation of relationships that had remained unchanged for decades. He withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, Paris Climate Agreement, and Iran nuclear deal while renegotiating NAFTA and pressuring NATO allies to increase defense spending. The investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election, led by special counsel Robert Mueller, dominated Trump's first 2 years in office and influenced his relationship with Congress and the media. Trump's response to this investigation, including his criticism of law enforcement agencies and claims of witch hunt, created constitutional tensions about presidential power and the independence of justice institutions. The Mueller investigation resulted in charges against 37 individuals and entities, including several Trump associates, though it did not establish criminal conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia. Trump's economic policies, including tax cuts and deregulation, generated strong economic growth and low unemployment rates that supported his claim to be successful at creating jobs and improving prosperity for American workers. The stock market reached record highs during his presidency, providing tangible evidence that his business background was translating into economic success. Unemployment reached 3.5% by 2019, the lowest level in 50 years, while GDP growth averaged over 2% annually before the COVID-19 pandemic. The 2018 midterm elections resulted in Democrats gaining control of the House of Representatives, creating a divided government that limited Trump's legislative agenda, but also provided him with political opponents to criticize and mobilize his supporters against. This dynamic shaped the second half of his presidency and influenced his re-election strategy. Republicans lost 41 House seats while gaining 2 Senate seats, creating a split government that complicated Trump's ability to pass major legislation. Trump's first impeachment, resulting from his phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky requesting investigation of Joe Biden's family, demonstrated his willingness to use presidential power in ways that critics considered inappropriate, but that he defended as legitimate efforts to combat corruption and ensure election integrity. The House voted to impeach Trump on charges of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, making him only the 3rd president in American history to be impeached. The COVID-19 pandemic that began in early 2020 presented Trump with a crisis that required different skills than business management or political campaigning. His response emphasized economic concerns and state-level responsibility rather than federal coordination, reflecting his preference for decentralized approaches to problem-solving and his concern about economic damage from lockdown policies. The pandemic ultimately claimed over 400,000 American lives during Trump's presidency, while causing the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. Trump's handling of the 2020 election results, including his claims of voter fraud and attempts to challenge results in multiple states, created unprecedented tensions about peaceful transfer of power and the integrity of American democratic institutions. His actions between Election Day and January 20th, 2021 culminated in the January 6th Capitol riot and his second impeachment. He became the first president in American history to be impeached twice, though he was acquitted by the Senate both times. The January 6th, 2021 attacks on the Capitol by Trump supporters, attempting to prevent certification of the Electoral College results, represented the most serious challenge to American democratic institutions since the Civil War. Trump's role in encouraging the protest and his response to the violence became central issues in his second impeachment trial and influenced his post-presidency political prospects. Over 800 individuals were eventually charged with crimes related to the January 6th events. Trump's presidency also marked a significant shift in how presidents used executive power to implement policy without congressional approval. Through executive orders, regulatory changes, and administrative actions, Trump demonstrated that presidents could pursue substantial policy changes even when facing opposition from Congress. This approach influenced how future presidents would think about using executive authority. The relationship between Trump and the federal bureaucracy was often contentious, as career government employees sometimes resisted or delayed implementation of policies they considered inappropriate or illegal. This tension highlighted ongoing debates about the balance between political appointees and career civil servants in American government operations. Trump's impact on the federal judiciary was substantial, with the appointment of 3 Supreme Court justices and over 200 federal judges, who would influence American law for decades after his presidency ended. These appointments represented one of his most lasting political achievements and helped solidify conservative legal principles across the federal court system. The international impact of Trump's presidency included significant changes in trade relationships, military deployments, and diplomatic priorities that affected American relationships with allies and adversaries around the world. His America First approach influenced how other countries viewed American leadership and reliability in international affairs. Trump's use of social media as president also influenced how political leaders around the world communicated with their citizens, demonstrating that direct communication through digital platforms could be more effective than traditional diplomatic and media channels in some circumstances. The polarization that characterized American politics during Trump's presidency reflected deeper cultural and economic divisions that had been building for decades but were intensified by his communication style and policy priorities. This polarization would continue to influence American politics long after his presidency ended. But here's what historians will ultimately recognize about Trump's presidency. It wasn't just 4 years of unconventional leadership. It was a fundamental transformation of how presidents communicate with the public, use executive power, and challenge existing political and institutional arrangements. His presidency demonstrated that celebrity status and business success could translate into political power, while also revealing the tensions between populist leadership and constitutional governance that continue to shape American politics. The Trump story does not close with towers or elections, it continues with us. Every building, television broadcast, and political rally was part of a larger playbook that redefined how power works in America. Whether one admires him or despises him, Donald Trump's method cannot be ignored, because it proves that image can outlast debt, that brands can outlive failure, and that persistence can bend institutions to will. His rise shows us what kind of leaders America rewards and what patterns we may face again. The lessons of this history are not confined to Trump. They belong to anyone willing to see how ambition, spectacle, and systems intersect. His strategies, though controversial, demonstrate the power of narrative in shaping public life. They show how personality can dominate policy, and how media can blur the line between entertainment and leadership. History only teaches when we are ready to listen. And this story challenges us to ask, what comes next, and what role will we play in shaping it? Trump's journey is not only about him, it is about us, our institutions, and the values we reinforce. The reflection is clear. The same forces that built him can build others. For better or worse, the choice, as always, is ours. And what we do with this knowledge will define the next chapter of America's story. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure to subscribe and like so you never miss the next chapter in history's untold stories.